I learned some tips and tools
Are
on
you
how.
curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we are talking about dating strategies for long-term loving relationships here on the Pleasure Zone. And if you are new to this show has been running for over 10 years. There's over 400 episodes available that you can look back on, everything ranging from things that are fundamentals on self-awareness and healing for yourself so that you can be a better person in relationship and be able to know how to ask for what you would like in sex, all the way to some super duper kinky, sexy things. We talk about things from a historical standpoint, sociological, psychological, historical. It's fun. And if you are a long-term listener and you have listened to lots of shows and you feel like there may be an episode that I could still do something about that maybe I haven't talked about yet, love to know. Please send me a message. You can send me a message through my website, through milicajelenic.com. That's MILICAJELENIC.com. And you can send me an email and through there, and I would love to connect and find out what topic you would love me to talk about. I love when I get emails from my listeners. They brighten my day for sure. I love the feedback that I get from people, and I'm ever so grateful for that. It keeps me motivated and totally gets me into new topics quite often as well. So tonight's topic is actually inspired by somebody that I know. And I thought, oh, you know what? Maybe it's a great time to actually talk about dating strategies. It's also dating strategies. You can take this two ways. So you can take this dating strategies for you personally to have long-term loving relationships that are, for example, leading to things like commitments, marriage, that sort of thing. But a lot of these strategies can also be applied if you're looking for new friends, if you're looking for even to understand more about yourself in relationship with other people. And I think one of the key things first is to look at who are you and what is it that you stand for. And we will get into that. We're going to get into some of the things that, some strategies and some ideas on things that you need to do and know before going out into the dating world. Especially if you have ever found yourself out in the dating world with very little success and you found that you weren't attracting long-term loving relationships that you wanted to have. And I know a lot of successful people who have a lot of, in terms of success, I say that they are very successful in their work environment. They're doing really well financially. They have a lot of other things they would like in their life, but one of the things that they struggle with is how to find a compatible partner. And a lot of times they've tried all the dating apps, they've tried all kinds of resources, and like nothing seems to work. And what I know is that there's definitely more than one person out there for every one of us. So it's not just the one, there's someone out there for you, because that makes it a really needle in a haystack kind of a situation. There's more than one person out there for you. So, the chances are you will find somebody who's compatible. And one of the things that we need to figure out first is some things about yourself, right? So we'll look at that too. And I also am aware that a lot of people don't approach dating with any strategies. Well, I suppose the only target they have is nowadays this is more common. How do I get in the sack super fast is one of the ideas that people have. And the strategies they will use is that they'll give false impressions of who they are. They'll put up false pictures of themselves so that when you're on a dating site and you meet the person in person, they look nothing alike. I have to say that I unintentionally did that once. I wasn't on a dating site. I've never used like dating apps, but back in the day, pre-dating apps, there was internet dating. There was all that sort of internet stuff going on. I wasn't involved in that either. I'd gone out to a party and it was Halloween. I was not only was I dressed in costume, I was in character. And when I was in costume and in character, I had a different accent, I had a different persona, I had a different look, and I took it a little maybe too extreme because somebody that night had asked me on a date and I agreed in persona and in accent and all of it. And then, and a wig. So at the time I had a really short pixie haircut, and my wig was like dark brown, almost black with like Heidi braids. And you can imagine the shock look on the person's face when I met them for the date. They looked at me like, A, they didn't recognize me. I had to put on the persona again and the accent for them to recognize me. I recognized them off the bat because they weren't in costume. So I felt bad. I was like, I'm really sorry. So if you don't want to go on a date, like if, if you had a crush on the persona and not, and you, because you don't really know me, I get that. We don't have to go out. But they were curious enough that we stuck to it. And I think one of the things that happens nowadays is something similar in that people will put on a look or on a sort of they'll put themselves out there in a certain way that isn't really who they are. So it can be very confusing for people. Now, under no other circumstances had I ever done that, where I'd put on a persona and gone out partying and met people to like date. I was always myself, other than Halloween when I would go full force into character. After that, I actually never went out to an event on Halloween where I was like at a place where I would get hit on. It was much calmer after that. It's just funny to me to think about it. So definitely show up genuine. That's really helpful. When you want to be in a long-term loving relationship, wherever it is you're putting yourself out, whether it's on apps or dating sites or you're going to speed dating events, show up as you, because the thing is, especially in like things like speed dating and you have 7 minutes to show up as you, your best bet is to fully embrace who you are and the questions coming at you and be so completely honest about them. You have nothing to lose being yourself in those situations. So for a lot of people, when they're looking for long-term relationships, what'll happen is that there are some unhealed parts that just desperately want to be loved. And what I often see people doing or hear about people doing is that they will bend, or they'll not fully be themselves because they just want to be loved. So they might agree to say, they might, laugh at a joke that really normally wouldn't be funny to them because they just want to be loved. They might agree to certain morals or standards that they normally wouldn't agree to because they just want to be loved. So do you see where I'm getting at with this? The importance to actually do a lot of inner self-healing before you go out looking for a long-term loving relationship is really important. If you're looking to utilize relationships as stepping stones for personal growth, to be able to learn more about yourself, yes, those aren't necessarily relationships that are going to be long-term because you're still learning who you are. And yes, on occasion, you can be with somebody who's also learning who they are and you can grow together. Now, That's not always the case, though. So in the dating world, what we want to do is learn who you are first. That's our primary target. Who am I? What do I stand for? So, for example, one of the things that I stand for is equity. And one of the other things I stand for is I stand for the rights of anybody to love anybody else. And I stand for consent. And I stand for being able to communicate what you desire and being open to that. So there are certain things in relationship that I would not waver on. So I would not marry somebody who is homophobic or transphobic. I wouldn't marry somebody who has issue with people loving whoever they want to love. I couldn't do that. It would drive me mental. We would not be compatible. Our values would not be compatible. I'm all for personal choice when it comes to freedom for health, freedom for what you want to say. So I also wouldn't be able to be in a long-term loving relationship with somebody if they had certain dogmas or beliefs. I'm going to call them dogmas because they're beyond beliefs, that it's this way or no way. So I know what works for me. And yes, it sounds like I'm saying it's this way or no way, but I know what works for me. And being in a relationship with someone who has those rules should be in a relationship with somebody else who has matching rules. So I'm not saying they should never be in a relationship because they're like that. It would be nice if, you could be in a relationship with somebody who has very different values than you and grow from each other. That takes a lot of maturity, and it takes also a lot of being willing to listen. And I've had a lot of growth, and so I think, and continue to grow. And my husband continues to grow, and we're always learning and learning new things. So if we were stagnant, that wouldn't work so great either, right? So when you are looking at a long-term loving relationship, you can have a long-term relationship that isn't loving. That's why I keep adding that word loving in there. I have they're no longer alive, a great aunt and great uncle who absolutely didn't love each other, probably not from the start. And I think, as the story goes, I think my great aunt got married at like the age of 17 or 18. One day she said she was going out for lunch, and then 3 days later she came back married. And she fought every day of her marriage with her husband, and they lived well into their 80s. So well over 60 years, they fought practically every day. And their that is not a relationship that would work for me. That relationship seemed to work in some way for them. So they had a long-term relationship. Was that loving? That's a hard question to answer. I didn't see that as love. That's not the kind of love I would want to have. So that might have been the kind of love they wanted to have. So again, defining it for you, like what is loving to you? Is arguing with somebody every day of your marriage something that shows and proves to you that somebody loves you? For me, it doesn't, but I do know people who absolutely believe that my dad is one of those people who believes fighting is a way to show that you love, and my mom is the opposite. So you can imagine their marriage did not last. These things are good to know up front. Grateful for their marriage because I came of it. And my brother was the reason for it. But I think if we really sat down and were able to decipher what are things that are really important to us, what are some values we hold near and dear, and then you can bring those to the table when you're dating, and you can make that as part of your profiles. If you are dating online, you can make it as part of the energy that you put behind what you're photographing. Say you're somebody who promotes modesty in your life, but all of your pictures show you in a bikini. that would be very conflicting. So have the energy of what you're putting out there match what you would like people to see about you and know about you. Yeah. So taking different ideas and different values, if you're somebody who's highly religious, and that's really important to you that you share religious beliefs, and you know that that's something you don't waver on. And for a lot of people, that can be a foundation for a relationship, is having this similar religious beliefs. And it can be not only foundational, it can be a way to have something steady in your relationship that you can rely on. So if and when in doubt, there's stress is going on, generally in relationships where there is a religious foundation, people will go to their religious advisors, whether, you're going to your rabbi, or you're going to your priest, your pastor, your any religious leader, monk, whatever it happens to be. You have somebody that you can go to that can refer you to different religious beliefs or even practices that could get you back on track in your marriage. So if that's fundamental to you, if you are, and even within certain religions, there's going to be even breakoffs. Like I recently was trying to introduce a couple, and the woman said, I don't know if, she's like, I believe in God strongly and I'm a Christian, but I don't know if I can be with a person of that particular faith because it's very different than what I grew up with. And I was like, wow, that was actually really cool for me to hear, because that isn't something that is, that's not fundamentally important to me. So I have my own relationship with God, the universe, whatever you guys all want to call it. And my husband can have his own. We don't go to church together or anything. I fully respect when people do that, and that's something that they use as a way to come together as a family and as a couple. So if that's important to you, that's some of your values, right? Your values and morals are really important to be aware of, and that's part of self-discovery. So you need to know certain things about yourself that are important to you, and you need to bring them forth and not be shy about that. Because if you are shy about it, you're going to end up dragging out relationships for longer than needed and not really know if there's any future in them. So we're going to head to our first commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email. info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet, sweet pleasure seekers. Those of you listening today are probably seeking to have pleasure in a long-term loving relationship. Loving, I said that word. Yeah, so why did I say that? Because what I do know is you can have long-term relationships that are stress-based, trauma-based, abuse-related, and they can last a really long time because the people who are being abused don't know how to get out, and the abusers make sure that you don't know how to. Long-term loving relationship. What a novel concept. And that's where both partners are loving to each other. It's not a one person gets the loving and the other person doesn't, because that's a bit abusive as well. So how do we have long-term loving relationships? Always starts with ourselves, always. So in order to be able to give love truly, unconditionally to a partner, there are some things you need to be able to do, and you need to be able to let them be fully them and not have expectation of how they should be or should behave or should any of that. You should be this, you should be that. Oh, that's a lot of stress, right? And it's unkind to them, because what you're basically saying is you're not good enough for me to love you until you do A, B, C, and D and behave and act exactly how I want you to. So you can mold people into whatever you want to do. And I joke that, training my husband isn't done. I've never trained my husband, but it's like an inside joke. So, because he has his own mind, and so do I. We're 100% about free will and personal freedom and choice in this house. So those are things that we have in our relationship that are foundations of what gives us a sense of connection to each other and what we can always fall back on. So if we truly believe in free will and we truly believe in freedom of choice, what to do, who to love, how to be, and yes, it does. Freedom to, then people will be like writing, well, what if that means he's got freedom to abuse, blah, 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 freedom for rape, freedom for violence, freedom for murder. That's not really freedom, because you're impinging your desires on somebody else. So you're taking away somebody else's freedom. As soon as you're taking away somebody else's freedom, there's no longer freedom. So consent is involved in freedom. So I just want to make that clear for those of you who want to argue me on what is freedom. As soon as you take away somebody else's freedom, you are no longer in a freedom agreement. And so now we're looking at, how do you have freedom in a relationship? Freedom in a relationship can come across almost like you don't care, but you actually care deeply. So for example, in our house, we have a lot of, say, for example, my husband goes out to work. He'll just say, okay, hon, sexy pants is usually what he calls me, is my nickname. So sexy pants. And I call him sexy pants too. And we'll say something like that. And then he'll go off to work and see you later. I'm like, okay, cool. There's no like, what time are you going to be home? Where are you going? Where are you working? Because he's in construction. Like, there's none of the like checking in and checking up on. The only time I have ever called to check up on him is he was like unusually late, where he's normally like home between a certain 4-hour span, and he was like an hour and a half late, and the weather was bad, and I was like, oh my God, are you okay? It was more about his safety than anything. And so being able to trust that you know who you're with is helpful. And the way that you can learn how to trust who you're with is by trusting yourself, trusting your gut instinct. So one of the ways to have a long-term loving relationship is to really trust you and trust the information that's coming into you. Like if you're concerned about something like, hey, do we have enough money to pay the bills? And then you check in with your partner and they're like, yeah, we're good. We've got this covered. Here's our numbers. Here we go. Oh, okay, cool. Awesome. You can bring up your concerns without feeling like accusatory or anything like that. And you can bring up concerns because maybe you're having an awareness and maybe you do need to move money over or something. Could be money related. There's usually money, sex. Those are usually some of the biggest arguments that go on. So in order to have a long-term loving relationship, we need to also understand a few things about finances as well. And we also need, so even, I know this sounds ridiculous, but even you're going into dating, have a clear understanding of, for you, what are you willing to share about your finances? What are you willing to, if you want to hide everything about your money, then there's something that's going on that you're not really willing to be vulnerable with your partner. And I do know somebody who ended up in a relationship for about a year and didn't know that they were dating somebody who was very rich. And upon getting engaged, they were informed that this person was really rich and they needed to sign a prenup. And they were like, oh, I didn't even know you were rich. So you would think at that point that the person getting them to sign a prenup would just go, oh, if you didn't even know I was rich, the chances are then that didn't matter to you. You're not with me for that. So no worries. Anyway, that wasn't the case. But why to discuss the finances is because I also know people who have gotten into relationships where the other partner was like hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt and did not say anything, married them, and now they're sharing debt, and they feel, the person who married the person in debt feels stuck. So out of all kindness, be honest about your money. If you are owing money, then, and you're owing like a lot that's not manageable, then it's really important to say, I'm in a financial situation right now. Like if the relationship gets to a point where it's serious and you're discussing things about marriage. And I have to say that it was probably within the first 5 dates that my husband and I discussed marriage. One, I was 39 years old at the time, and my husband was 49. And we were just like, we're either getting married or we're not. So why are we going to waste time? We had every serious conversation we could possibly have in the first 5 dates. And that's where we went from there. We discussed children. We discussed even things like, hey, if we're together and one of us ends up like in an accident or something happens and we couldn't have sex, is it okay? Would you be okay? Or, we were creating agreements around, would you be willing to have like surrogate sexual partners if you weren't available for sex? Would you be willing to do this? We negotiated terms that a lot of people don't consider. And to have a really loving long-term relationship, it's really handy to get a lot of those stressful conversations out of the way before you get married. So even discussing things like, do you want to have children? And I know people who were married for like 2 years. I actually have a friend who was with somebody for like 15 years, and she had assumed that there was going to probably be children, and her partner had zero desire for children, and the conversation hadn't come up for like over a decade. So have these conversations, right? I know this is counterintuitive to what most people talk about when it comes to dating. If you are truly interested in getting in there, having long-term relationships, if you're not just playing the field, that's a different kind of dating, playing the field, having fun. We're talking about how do you dive in and how do you know if you're ready to commit to somebody? And how do you dive in and make a decision within the first 3 months, whether you're going to keep going or whether you're going to disband? And I highly suggest that you go for 3 months. People will change personality kind of during seasons. So you can see if somebody's like seasonally affected, could be seasonal depression, that sort of thing. I recommend doing that before even getting engaged. And, having a minimum of 3-date rule before you have, or at least knowing or going out with a person for at least 3 times before having any physical contact, because your body will give you responses to things, and your body might get turned on just because you've had physical contact, and maybe it's been physical contact you haven't had in a long time. So your body's going to have a physical reaction. There's a biochemical reaction that happens as well. And it can just be a physiological response that makes you think you're in love, but you're just having a physiological response. So I'd wait 3 dates before you get it on, especially if you're looking for a long-term relationship. And it also sees if the person's willing to put in a little effort. And I think it's important to do that. I knew my husband for well over a year before we had our first date. Even like he was around a lot because he was working on my house. So I knew him. So our first date was more like the 50th date. So when you're looking for these long-term relationships, it's really important to be able to gauge who the person you're dating is, without having your body be the entire beacon of response. Like, oh, I'm so turned on by them. Well, that's great that your body wants to have sex. Pheromones will do things to you, especially if your clock is ticking. Your pheromones will start to give off in a way that's like, I need to have you to have babies with you. And then those are sometimes very short-term relationships that don't go very far because your hormones are running the show. There isn't a deeper connection happening. So we're going to look at how to have long-term loving relationships, especially knowing yourself, knowing what works for you. Having some self-restraint is really great. And being real, we've talked about that as well. So we're going to talk more about how to have these long-term loving relationships when we come back from this commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelenic.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, We're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is the Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email. info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Today we're talking about dating in order to have long-term loving relationships. So that's the target of this whole show, is to teach you some dating strategies for long-term loving relationships. So some of the strategies I've talked about are being able to do a lot of introspection, know you first. What are your morals? What are your standards? Once you start to understand that, and your standards and morals can change over time, but having a sense of who you are and what you stand for me, it's even more extreme. It's like, what am I willing to die for? Those are, I know that sounds extreme. I'll take mine that far, is really helpful so that you can, as you know that about you, what starts to happen is you become confident in that about yourself. Your confidence starts to grow and you start to have a resonance that is, I know who I am and I know what I stand for. I know that I will take somebody down if they are insulting certain people's lifestyles. I know I'll take people down. I know I'll put people in check if they're acting like idiots. In my opinion, they're acting like idiots. Because it's just my opinion. I know that about me, and I know that they wouldn't be people that I would choose to socialize with, because I wouldn't have fun around them. And so I do like to socialize with people who are different than me and have different beliefs than me. If they're adamant that they're right, and that whatever it is that I'm completely wrong, it wouldn't work. It just doesn't make sense. There would be too much tension, right? So why would I choose tension? Now, if there's a resonance there that seems to draw somebody in because there's curiosity and conversation can happen, then that's very different. Because I have had conversations with people who are racists and they do have a lot of opinions, and I can still have conversations with them because they're not trying to convince me that they're right. It's just what they feel. So I'm like, hey, that's how you feel. I do not feel the same way you feel. So if they actually started to be somebody who bashed another person, and the other person isn't in the room to stand up for themselves, I would do that. And I would want to be with somebody who has those values and morals as well, who would stand up for you even when you're not in the room. Yeah. So I say that because a lot of how I feel about things has to do with the rights, human rights. So the rights of living beings. So if you've approached your dating with zero strategies, then what might be happening is that, you go on 20 dates and nothing works out. And you're like, I don't really like that person because of their eyebrows. I don't really like that person because they like hockey. I don't really like that person because they snore. These are all things that are superficial usually, because you don't actually know who you are. So you can't connect with the person on a deeper level. When you're just wanting to date for fun, that can work. Like, you're just having fun. You're like, I'll go on 20 dates with that guy. Oh, he snores. I'm not interested. I'm out of here. That's a totally different ballgame. If you're dating for long-term loving relationships, then you need to have a strategy in place that has to do with loving long-term relationship, which has to do really with you feeling connection to another person. So how do you know what your morals are? Usually you can evaluate them by what enrages you. Like, if you're watching the news and something really pisses you off and you're like, that is so wrong, usually the news will do that to people, then you'll know that that's something that you stand either for, like you're like, oh, that makes me so mad that that's happening to people, then you know that you stand for the rights of those people that are being wronged. Or you're like, oh, I'm so mad that, whatever it happens to be, you're having an extreme reaction to it. That can usually teach you how you feel and what you stand for. So other things to know before getting into a long-term loving relationship is, check in on yourself every once in a while and just check in and see. And a couple of weeks ago, I did a show with Jeremy Rodruck, who works mainly with men on helping them get from boy to king. And what does that mean is like, are you operating from being an inner child? Are you operating from trying to be the man, or are you being the king? And the king is a very different energy than maybe a lot of people think. It's actually just the energy of confidence, kindness, benevolence, playfulness. It's like very lots of different things involved there. The inner child is more like, oh, anger, jealousy, fear, rage, all the things that, and it can be extreme playfulness as well, irresponsibility, where the inner adult is more responsible, in control, needs to be in control, prove worth, all that sort of stuff. So depending on where you're at in your growth, and usually the younger you are, the more towards inner child you are, unless you're weird like me and started doing inner child work when you were like 19 or 20 years old. I think I was 19. I was thinking I was 22, but I think I was actually younger, around 19. And if you started doing a lot of your own therapy and inner work when you were really young, then you may have become an adult around the adult age, right in your 20s and early 30s, and then you may actually be moving into your royal self appropriately in your 40s, 50s, 60s. So it really helps to have your inner child integrated into your life, where the inner child doesn't run your life. So if you are a jealous person, if you get rage, if you get a lot of fear, like if you're living in fear all the time, if you have a lot of blame, it's other person's fault, then you're in more of an inner child state. And so being in a relationship that's loving and long-term is going to be more challenging, because you have to be not just a grown-up to be in a loving long-term relationship, you need to be your autonomous sovereign self, where you have confidence, where you have understanding, where you have benevolence towards each other. So knowing also what somebody else's love language is you can deliver that to them. And knowing what your love language is, you can ask for your love language to be delivered. And you know what? When you are with somebody who's either in the grown-up or in the sovereign king-queen phase, you will find that people are excited and happy to contribute to you, and they don't take it personally, like, or offense. They don't feel offended by things. So let's be like, yeah, you want to do that? Let's try that. That sounds great. It's not like, you want to do that? You mean that I'm not a good lover and you don't think what I'm doing is good? Yeah, that's conversations I've had in my 20s when I was like, that's not what I was saying. What I was saying is I really want to try this because I know how my body works. So things can feel awkward when things are very personally offensive a lot of the time. So healing your inner child, what a relief. It's such a contribution to having a long-term loving relationship. And healing that inner child can also help you understand your wounds and how they kind of come out of you, and they might be reflected in others, and how quite possibly you're attracting people to start healing those wounds. Like, looking back in my life, I can see how the partners I've had have helped me heal certain events in my life, certain experiences, because I did start therapy so young. Well, although I do know people who started therapy in their childhood, but I was personally choosing therapy so that I would be able to be a more conscious person, rather than like, I'm fucked up, fix me. I was like, I don't know what I am, but I know that I can be a better me. So that was my target, was be a better me, and be able to be a better me, because I wanted to be able to, if I ever had children, be a better parent, to my children. My parents were exactly what I needed. And then I wanted to be something different for my kid, to be able to know these things. My parents didn't know love language. My mom does now, but my dad does not know what that is. So I had a lot more information, and hopefully in time and age, we all get more information and we can become better people, right? And that helps too in the dating for long-term loving relationships. And I would recommend too that if you are really looking at the qualities you need to have, these are part of your things that are really important to you. Maybe you need somebody who's really good with communication and has patience and all kinds of things like that. Whatever qualities you really are seeking in somebody, it's really good to also have them in yourself. And so if you don't have them, there are things you can cultivate in yourself, right? So if you really want somebody to be patient, cultivate your patience. If you really want somebody to be kind or a gentle lover, be a kind and gentle lover. So everything that you're desiring from somebody else that you would hope that they would give you in a long-term loving relationship, cultivate it in you first. Because a lot of times it's seeing this stuff is where you can actually see that there is room for growth. So you're like, oh, I really want this. Okay, then check. Am I being that? Do I have that capacity? Am I able to be patient? Oh, no, I'm actually not. Okay, I will cultivate patience. And what does that look like and what does that mean? That's where having a coach really comes in handy. So if you would like coaching, if you'd like to try me out and see if coaching with me works for you, you can always book a free 15-minute session to just check it out and see if it works for you. You can get that through the booking link on my website through milicajelenic.com, MILICAJELENIC.com. 15 minutes is free. Anytime after that is a paid for session. So let's get on a call and see and learn more about you if you want to be able to figure out who you are more. We're going to head to our last commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. In these last few little minutes, I just want to kind of recap a little bit and then give you some tips and tools on where to go, how to get started in the dating world. So know thyself is so important. So do some journaling, get a coach. You can come chat with me. There are many ways that you can start to know who you are more so that you can bring your fullest you to the table. When you're dating, you can do this, right out of the gates. If you're like 18 years old or 16 years old and dating, knowing who you are and what you stand for going into relationship, any relationship, even friendships, can really help in you not losing yourself or being angry at yourself afterwards, going, that person did this and this. That person could not manipulate you. If you truly know you, you can't really get manipulated into things. So know you, stand up for yourselves. And if that means you need to work on that first, work on that first. If you're feeling lonely and you think that a partner is going to fill the hole, I'm sure they could fill a hole. However, that doesn't mean they're going to emotionally fill the hole. You know, sticking body parts into other body parts will fill a hole. However, filling other emotional holes is important that you do that work. And at least start that work, because the work of knowing you is something that is and probably will be a lifelong thing that you do. But the willingness to know you, the willingness to observe yourself can be really helpful. That is also really helpful in having a long-term loving relationship, because then you can see if you've hurt somebody, you can apologize. Well, that certainly adds to love. Observing yourself and observing your partner, you can see what, maybe there's something lacking, maybe there's room for communication, maybe there's room for conversation, exploration, whatever happens to be. So you need to take that time to be able to observe self, and then you observe yourself in relationship to the other, and then you can also observe the other, just for the sake of seeing, what can I offer you? What can I gift you that will help you be a happier, more fulfilled person? More fulfilled, not fulfilled, more fulfilled. Their job is to fulfill themselves like 99%, and you can add in, right? You can be the cherry on top. So know all of these things. Remember that you can take your time with dating. Know the person well. Go through those uncomfortable periods where you get so horny you want to rip each other's clothes off, and just try and withhold through that. I know that is so funny coming from the pleasure zone, but a lot of times if you're looking for long-term loving relationship, you need to actually take some time with that. If you're looking to get it on and have fun and just have a fest, you can just go out and have fun. Be cautious, be smart, don't get any STIs, and that's a totally different relationship. So know, what kind of relationship would you like to have? Do you just want to have a free-for-all screw fest, or would you like to have a long-term loving relationship? They're approached very differently. The strategies around that are very different. Neither one is more valuable than the other. Only thing is, it's more valuable to you because it's what you desire. So what do you desire? Figure that out. Then, take the time. Know who you would like to have. Write down some qualities of that person. See if you have them, those qualities. If you don't have them, cultivate them in yourself, because then you start to resonate at that frequency, and that person will be attracted to you because you will be resonating at the frequency of what you're looking for. They will have that frequency as well. The energetics of dating. So once you've got that underway, a lot of times then it's just being willing to be vulnerable enough to go out and find people, whether that's dating sites, which might be a little bit better than apps, maybe not. And then if you're really serious, and you don't really know how to meet somebody, getting a matchmaker involved is completely valid and totally works. And ask friends. As you start to know you and you have a list of qualities that you would like in a person, it's not size of their body parts, it's qualities of their personality. Because if you can't be attracted to the person of who they are, then you need to mature first before you get in a relationship. And that's fine. Go have your fun, go have your screw fests, and then come back when you're ready for reality. You will then be able to find people who are quality, long-term loving relationships. Be willing to discuss the things that are uncomfortable, like finances, and be willing to discuss things like sex, what you like and what you don't like. You can always go over to my website, milicajelenic.com, and I have a little list of do's, don'ts, and maybes that can help you too see where you're at sexually. It's very vanilla, so it can get you started. And if you'd like to go over that with me at any point, let me know. Just say I'd like a review on the do's, don'ts, maybes list, and we can get on a 15-minute call and do that. I really hope you guys, when you take this information, you go out and first really cultivate yourself and who you are, know what you desire, and then resonate. Be that.
Thank you for listening to The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.